جنس إريتراويان أب الرابع جنبر فنو كوفر إريترا بريطانيا إيرستار UK Media Voice of Eritrea Port from Podcast Capitalism.com.
Horn of Africa Citizen News. No more unites against HR 6600 and U.S. aggression against Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. The No More organization, a nonviolent movement, strongly criticizes the bill passed by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which demands hostile U.S. action in Ethiopia's ongoing war and was introduced by US Representatives Tom Malinowski, DNJ07, and Young Kim, RCA39. The bill, dubbed the Ethiopia Stabilization, Peace, and Democracy Act, HR 6600, by Ranking Member Michael McCaul, RTX10, Chair Gregory Meeks, DNY05, Brad Sherman, DCA30, and David Cicilline, DRI01, calls for the imposition of harsh sanctions and violent measures against the peoples, governments, and diasporas of the Horn of Africa who fall into the category of foreign person. The fact that the State Department issued a press release restricting the issuance of visas to Somalis who are believed to be responsible for, or complicit in, undermining the democratic process in Somalia on the same day that the U.S. Congress advanced H.R. 6600 is not lost on the people of the Horn of Africa. Press statement promoting sustainable peace and responsive governance in Somalia, February 8, 2022. As a result, it appears that the Democratic Party-controlled executive and legislative branches of the U.S. government are taking hostile, counterproductive, and punitive measures against all peoples in the Horn of Africa who they subjectively believe is undermining their failed policies in the region. The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, TPLF, a U.S. Department of Homeland Security designated terrorist organization, began the war in Ethiopia and launched a missile barrage on Eritrea in November 2020, both of which are historical facts that the Biden administration and the sponsors of H.R. 6600 ignore. Furthermore, the TPLF ignored the Ethiopian government's call for a ceasefire in June 2021, prompting the terrorist group to recruit Tigrayan child soldiers and launch offensives in the Afar and Amhara regions, killing thousands of innocent civilians, displacing hundreds of thousands more, using rape as a weapon of war, and deliberately destroying infrastructure, including over 3,000 hospitals. In western Ethiopia, the TPLF also emboldened the Associated Oromo Liberation Army to carry out targeted mass executions of Amhara civilians. The U.S. administration is both mute and complicit in the TPLF's continuous war crimes against these defenseless civilians. Instead of criticizing the TPLF, the U.S. has made the Eritrean government and Eritrea scapegoats, despite the fact that Eritrea is specifically identified in the law and is already the target of harsh economic sanctions. It should be remembered that the African Union Assembly clearly opposed sanctions and unilateral coercive measures on African countries at its 35th session, and reaffirmed its solidarity with the people of Zimbabwe, South Sudan, and Eritrea. Ethiopians, Eritreans, and Somalis have the right to defend their countries against terrorism perpetrated by the TPLF and other armed groups. They have a right to pursue their own political vision for the Horn of Africa that they believe will bring better collective peace, prosperity, and growth to the region. They also have the right to refuse to talk with a terrorist organization that has repeatedly broken peace agreements with U.S. support and encouragement, e.g., 2000 Algiers Agreement. Stability, peace, and democracy are not undermined by such a refusal, rather, they are upheld. It should not be grounds for unilateral sanctions to challenge or disagree with disastrous U.S. policies, especially when doing so is in the best interests of the American people and the people of the Horn of Africa. The No More movement views such imperial actions as overt threats and acts of intimidation aimed at forcing compliance with a single vision of the Horn of Africa. These tactics are also considered erroneous since they are based on the mistaken conviction that they will achieve the declared or unstated goals of their issuers, as well as desperate because they are based on weakness rather than strength. The bill specifically mentions the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea, and directs the U.S. government to limit development aid, limit visa issuance, combat hate speech and disinformation in collaboration with private social media companies, designate actors guilty of genocide, and address threats against Ethiopian citizens working for U.S. government agencies in Ethiopia. These proposed sanctions, which come after a series of failed multilateral sanctions attempts at the UN Security Council, are deceptively characterized as bilateral or multilateral in the bill's legal wording, despite the fact that the bill calls for their issuance by the U.S. president alone. Because no single country can be held responsible for the sanctions' fatal effect, This well-known method of masking unilateral imposition is employed to clear the U.S. of blame. Let Representatives Malinowski, McCaul, Meeks, Sherman, and Cicilline know that the popular and nonviolent No More movement is unified and ready to stiffly reject and mobilize the global masses against these recent acts of hostility toward the peoples and governments of the Horn of Africa. In the absence of any corrective measures, the No More movement's millions of supporters, concentrated in strategic urban centers across the U.S., plan to mobilize U.S. citizens to the greatest extent possible to remove all sponsors of HR 6600 from office and exercise their democratic rights against all parties that openly or tacitly support the Biden administration's deadly neo-colonial actions against the people of the Horn of Africa. We hope that U.S. officials participating in the recent aggressive measures towards the Horn of Africa will change their minds and pursue corrective action in the interests of both U.S. and African populations.